Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got a very special guest for you today, Nicholas, coming out of Oslo, Norway, and he's a marketing and brand specialist. And he's he's educated, he's worked all over the world, very internationally, in Asia, Europe. And I'm really happy to have him and to share his viewpoints and add some value to the listeners. Nicholas, welcome.
Yeah, I'm super excited to join you in Texas, even though it's only virtually.
Yeah, I love this post-COVID world. We can connect anywhere. Yeah, start off by introducing yourself, and we'll jump right into the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for that, Christopher. I'm South African, as some of you might have noticed. I taught Elon Musk all he knows, basically. No, that's so. I grew up in South Africa, did my studies in the UK, came back to South Africa, and was one of the first South African graduates to move up to Nigeria to work in Africa, as we call it, because in South Africa is not really Africa. The rest of Africa is Africa. And that started out my journey into emerging markets. I joined a fantastic company called Nando's, which is a chicken franchise. And I opened up in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And so I know a lot about chickens. You can ask me about chickens, and specifically flame grilled hairy prairie chicken. I then, because I was one of the few folks who had experience up in Africa, I joined Interbrand, which is the world's largest brand agency, and started working on some of the most amazing brands and built up brands across Africa. This was a time when Africa was opening up to the world and everyone was saying Africa's the next big thing. It's been very disappointing that it's gone a little bit downhill since then. But anyway, that's when I pivoted a little bit to Southeast Asia and Asia, which was the next big thing. I was head of marketing for MTV and Comedy Central in Africa. So I launched Comedy Central. That was one of the highlights. I can do a little tick there. I've done voiceovers for Comedy Central and a whole bunch of interesting programs. I then decided to start my own business called Wunderbrand because I wanted to build emerging market brands at big branding and marketing organizations. They typically only have big clients who can afford to pay for those big shiny buildings and expensive business lunches. So I started Wunderbrand because I wanted to help emerging market brands around emerging markets, so Asia and Africa, to compete with the big boys, so that it's not just Unilever and Coca-Cola and Procter and Gamble eating all their lunch. So that was 13 years ago. I can't believe it. So I've done everything from branding, creating new royal crests for chiefs. I've branded some of the biggest banks in Africa. I've branded airlines. And yeah, had some big, awesome ups with the business and then some tremendous downs, which I'm still recovering from. And then I moved to Malaysia to go into sort of the next step in my journey, which was to move into AI. And let me just say, this is before ChatGPT. So I got on the bus before ChatGPT. But I started with a fantastic founder in Malaysia, Mr. Kumaran Singaram of Cloud IoT. We set up a new data science driven business, which was fantastic. And then COVID hit, and luckily we were a data science business all based online. So that was quite good. Then I decided Malaysia's too hot. So I moved to Norway, where I now lecture in digital marketing at Norway University. And yeah, have Wunderbrand and my podcast From Startup to Wunderbrand. And that keeps me busy with my 2 kids and my marvelous wife.
Yeah, a really, really fascinating and really great international story. And we'll dive right in. And so, one thing that really stood out to me during your introduction was just across cultures, and how does branding change, or is it what adaptations or nuances? Is it all the same, just variations on a theme? How do you approach branding in different cultures?
It absolutely is important to understand local cultures. I'll give you one example that we were given when I was at university. There was a big American brand, and there's a drinks brand called Mellow Yellow, which had a yellow, it was all yellow. And this is during apartheid times in South Africa, they were going to launch this new product in the townships, which is like the equivalent of favelas and so on. and they painted all of these buildings yellow, and they had these yellow cars, which they were going to, would say, covered completely, and we're going to sell this product through the townships. Unbeknownst to them, the security police and the police in South Africa had completely yellow motor cars. So as soon as these yellow cars came down the road, they chased away their customers versus getting their customers to them. So these are things where you've got to understand the local nuances. It also comes into not just the name. So for example, there are a couple of German products I'm sure you've seen. There's a UK or American brand called Mist, M-I-S-T, which is going to launch in Germany. And Mist in German means crap, basically, or manure. So that didn't go down. So that's just from a naming perspective. And all of you have heard about Pinto and Pajero or Pajero, the car, which is a rude word in Spain and South America. So that's just on the naming side. If you don't, the last one I've got to say, and I'm sure, Christopher, you've heard this one, there's Bite the Wax Tadpole. Do you know what brand that is?
By the Wax Tadpole, is it American brand or is it European?
It is an American brand. It is an American brand. Let's just put it this way. When they moved to China, they transliterated the name into Bite the Wax Tadpole. Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. They pronounce it differently, but that means Coca-Cola. They just found the characters that sounded like Coca-Cola, and it is Bite the Wax Tadpole. Those are simple examples that are easy to avoid. But when brands go into new countries, sometimes the product has to be adjusted. So if I take Nando's, which is a fantastic flame grilled prairie chicken brand, when they move into new countries, for example, Malaysia, they added rice onto the menu because fries aren't very big in those countries and potatoes are expensive, etc. And rice, it's not mee goreng, but the other one, nasi goreng, and rice is a huge staple in those countries. So they had to add the sides that were more suitable to the local tastes, and they had to add an extra hot of their curry as well, not just a regular heat. So there are things like that. I can give countless examples of how one needs to really understand the country that you're going to and see how your product is going to work in those countries. And another nice example, obviously, is Kit Kat. And I'm sure everyone knows that marvelous green tea Kit Kat that the Japanese came out with. And the Americans never would have had a green tea version.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love the humor and just and they were talking about, I was reading this book on just the top brands, and it's always had this play on words like Coca-Cola or like Starbucks. But talk about just challenges in advertising and brand strategy in developing regions.
So I've been working in emerging markets for the last 20 years, and there's been a heck of a lot of change in those markets. When I first got to Nigeria, when I got to the airport, I had a fax of the person was going to collect me. Difficult in Nigeria. And because there were no mobile phones, the technology was slightly less advanced in those countries from a cost perspective. Fast forward 10 years and almost everybody had a mobile phone. And there was a whole new industry of people selling mobile phone recharge cards that upended and opened up a whole bunch of opportunities for women in particular to make an income by selling these mobile phone cards. From an advertising perspective, one of the advantages that emerging markets have over traditional markets is that their legacy media wasn't fantastic. So television, radio, newspapers, etc. So they were able to leapfrog directly into digital SMS, which is your text messages, using mobile ads, using things like that. So what happened is that because there were these brand new opportunities to reach millions of new customers, mobile just exploded across emerging markets. And this is in Asia, India, and Africa. Probably the penetration of mobile was quicker in those countries than it was in developed markets. When it comes to some difficulties, the technology that we have in the West is superior in some senses to what they had in these emerging markets that I was in. So It's very easy for you to go and rent a camera or rent lights and rent a studio. Those things weren't possible very often in these countries. So the price was much more expensive. We made a fortune in these countries in the early days because there was nothing. There was no infrastructure. They'd import almost everything. I remember bringing in envelopes and business cards and things like that, that the print quality in those countries was so terrible or not available at all that you made a fortune importing this stuff. And the delivery of these things was almost as expensive as the actual products themselves. So in terms of those, there's some issues there. And then the sophistication level or the conservative nature of a lot of these countries is quite different to what you'll find in the West. In the West, you've got quite an advanced knowledge of marketing. You've been marketed to, and we know what adverts are. We know what these things are. We almost had to start from scratch to say that if you win if there's a competition, you're not guaranteed to win. For example, these are simple things that we understand after years and years of having competitions and sweepstakes and that. So you have to really spell these things out really clearly so that the consumers aren't being screwed. And a lot of people obviously didn't do that. So the sophistication level there, one needs to be quite aware of that. And yeah, let's see if I can think of another nice example there. Yes, I'll take Nigeria, for example. I suppose it's similar to the States where you've got Democrat versus Republican. Just keep that in mind. So the south of Nigeria, you've got a majority Christian country. The north is majority Muslim. So when you're doing an advert, you cannot show somebody in a bikini. You can't show a woman with their shoulders showing and nothing on their head, for example. So we had to be aware of this as Western folks coming into these countries, creating adverts, so that you didn't create a riot or didn't drop sales of something because we showed somebody in a bikini or their ankle showing. So those are little subtle things that you had to keep in mind when working in these countries, which was a big shift for me.
Mm. Yeah. The other question I have for you is marketing and branding and advertising. How is it different because it sounds particularly like the West, it's very capitalist and it's capitalist in kind of other locales like Asia or Europe and South Africa. How does it compare? Is it same? Are there certain things you have to keep in mind, or is profit the motive? Like marketing and branding is to get you to buy their products, or is there a green component or a social component to the marketing and advertising?
Businesses are the same around the world. They are not there as charitable organizations. They are there to make cash money. So let's just keep that in mind. But you touch on an important point there, which is the way one communicates to these markets. In certain markets, it's about me. In other markets, it's more about community, what my family will think. And this comes from market research and understanding the local culture. So places like Tanzania are slightly more community-based. So you're not going to say, look at you being so fancy. It's like, this is going to make your society better, make your family proud of you. And the same in certain Asian countries as well. There's less of a me or Western sort of Calvinist outlook in terms of how one has to communicate. So that goes into the communication strategy. Humor also changes when it goes across countries. So some countries love humor, some countries it's too much of a touchy subject. So those are things to keep in mind there, Christopher.
Yeah. Which kind of moving the conversation along is one thing is talking about digital marketing. And I've only witnessed the evolution of media here. Really, social media is like the big thing, and kind of, legacy media is almost on its last leg. How do you see digital marketing evolution over the last 20 years? How has digital marketing landscape changed? What's consistent? What trends should marketers anticipate?
Is that all? I mean, if I can answer that, then I can charge much more money for this episode, Chris. So we've got to look at marketing in terms of humans haven't changed terribly much. Their media consumption has, but how people operate and how people think and how people behave hasn't really changed terribly much. We need to look at emotions, and a lot of folks are just trying to sell. What I've the biggest change for me in terms of social media, digital media, marketing media, etc., is just people are tired of it, and people have got an enormous, like, if you can beat this out, the bullshit meter, so they can tell when somebody is trying to sell them. Intelligent marketers and intelligent businesses understand the customer journey and the buyer journey, and need to make sure that they are creating value for the customer at each of these points and solving a problem for the customer. Whether you're using TikTok, Instagram, whatever new thing is going to come out, as long as you're solving a problem for a client, for a potential customer, and understand how you can solve that particular problem during the customer journey, you're going to do all right. So what I try and teach my students is that, yes, we've got to, from a functional perspective, understand how Facebook groups work. We need to know how to do SEO. We need to know how to create TikTok adverts. But the technology is going to change. You'll remember, Christopher, when Facebook came out in 1998, I think it was. No, not 1998, 2000, whenever. It's been 20 years or something that it's been around. Before that, what did we do? Did we buy products? Did we not buy anything? We still went out and bought. The place that we buy things has just changed, basically. Some new things going to come out. I see that the Google Lens and using AI goggles and things like that is going to adjust the way. It's going to create a whole bunch of new jobs and a whole bunch of new media agencies as we go into the future. But people still are going to go through still have to go through awareness, consideration, decision making, and purchasing, and you've got to make them loyal to you at the end. That hasn't changed. The method or the medium that you use is going to change. Nobody complained when Babylonic cuneiform was no longer used, and you used to have to use little stylus on a piece of wet clay. It's good to have changes in technology. We just need to understand consumer psychology and the customer journey. And I said customer journey.
How are you looking, or how are you thinking about AI in data analytics and data science and marketing and branding and advertising?
I love AI. So as I mentioned, I started a data science company. So I was in this during the time where ChatGPT was in the background. So I probably was in the first few that got access to ChatGPT when it came out. And it completely screwed up years of work and a whole bunch of other companies. What's happened in the marketing industry and the business industry as a whole is that, let's just take it like this. I'm sure you use spreadsheets and you had a notepad and you had data sitting around you on your desk and perhaps in a cabinet somewhere, and your mother and your sister had some bits of information. To get that, where's that business card? Where's that piece of information? Used to be a pain in the butt in the past. You'd put it to slid down the back of your cabinet, and that was a valuable piece of information. Now what you've got is people have structured their information much better. So now you can get those contact details in 5 different cloud devices. Your data is nicely structured. It is in ones and zeros, and you can do something with it, which is the fantastic thing about it. So a lot of companies in the past used to have a disadvantage because their data was all over the place. It was very expensive to have these huge computers and these data scientists or people working at your company organizing your data. Now everyone has access to that. So data is becoming almost less of a competitive advantage because everyone's got it. Everyone's data is nice and clean and in a logical database somewhere. I came up with a concept called creative data science, which is a layer on top of data science. So what this means is that, okay, everyone, all these companies, Unilever, Kimberly-Clark, Procter & Gamble, you name it, all have tons of great information, but so does everyone else. And what creative data science is, okay, we've got this data. Everyone has got access to similar types of data. How can we be creative with this? We need creative thinkers to say, okay, we've got this data. We've got to look at it and use it in new ways. So that for me is why, and I think the chap who started, just the chip maker, not Intel, the other one, AMD, anyway, NVIDIA. So he was saying, we don't need any more data scientists. You don't need more people learning code. We need people who are creative and can think, what are we going to do with the stuff that we've got? So Having data is great. It just means that all of the things that were lying around are less cluttered. But now we've got tons of it. What are we going to do with it? Is it clean? How are we going to use this? How can we combine our data with other companies' data? And we've got issues where Apple and Google, if you can't track Apple users, Google is now getting sued left and center for sharing for their cookies following everyone around. So the kind of data we were able to get in the past is not as fresh or as easily available in the future, which means you've got to find new ways of getting data. My last point on this is that there are still ways to use data in ways that can improve your business. And there's a fantastic chap that I interviewed who has a media buying platform that uses 27 months of your purchase of your online data and can get a 22% increase in the value of your marketing spend. And that's purely by using AI. So instead of you doing your own Google ads and things like that, their AI will look at what the best options are. Better than Google, better than Facebook. So there are companies out there that are now turning buttons left and right and improving the quality of data and using their own expertise to generate value out of this data and make companies more money or make them more effective. So there are so many things in this space that we could talk about that are adding value. But do I think it's going to take away people's jobs? No, I think it's going to just add new types of jobs. And it is going to mean that we're going to just get more ads and more stuff, more data. So that's one of the downsides.
Yeah, really interesting. How can people find you and follow you and reach out to you and find out more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, the easiest would be to go to wunderbrand.com, WUNDER brand.com. If you want to find my podcast and all of my nice photos of me on podcast, you can go to kuhne.no, KUHNE.no. Yeah, so you're welcome to reach out.
Yeah. Yeah, really love that, and keep up the great work, and all of Nicholas's resources will be in the show notes. And thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome.